Hello, Ectosage here on the Sage channel, and today we're going to be showing off this ship, which is a civilian transport ship that I've nicknamed or started calling the Seer. The idea behind this ship is that it would either be a civilian transport ship of the simplest sort, where it takes people from point A to point B, probably not over very long distances. These rooms here, which are all the same, would just be full of chairs, and they take people from basically one space station to another, or even from a space station in orbit on a planet down to the planet itself. Simple stuff like that. Or it would be a sightseer ship, where it would leave a space station or a larger transport ship and then go ahead and stop at itself outside of a interesting thing, such as anomaly, a nebula, or maybe even an interesting carved asteroid, or even a, what the hell, why not, a interesting space station. Anyway, if I was to fly around the back here, I can start going over the engines, and we have a large, interesting engine array here, which I like this design so much, I'll probably end up using it again on a lot of my other ships. And we got some engines up there too. Behind these, I believe there is one more engine behind each, and behind these, I believe there are 3 or 4 actually engines behind each of these to give us some extra boost. If we were to fly around to the bottom here, you can see we have a bunch of engines down here. I believe there might be another one behind this one. Let's just remove it and look. Nope. So the ship doesn't actually have that much upwards thrust, but it's got, a fair few large engines right there and a bunch of small ones. To stop the ship from moving forward, once we decide we want to stop moving, we have a bunch of engines here. I believe we actually have 2 engines at each one of these points, if I'm correct. Yep, we do indeed have 2 engines at each one of these points. And right here, we actually have a whole bunch of engines. If I was to really quickly fly over here and remove this, you can see we got a bunch of engines, because I realized that, hey, having 1 or 2 engines all along here might not be able to counter the huge amount of engines we actually have to move forward there, so I stuck a bunch more in there. And actually, if I was to fly up here, you can see we actually do have a nice little opening here with a red outline for those. Now, these things here actually have no exact purpose, but I ended up adding one eventually. If you look up the side, they're mainly for looks. But if I was to cut these open really quickly, let's start from down there and drag up to here, you can see that I've just damaged them, so I'll have to reload this level. But we had a bunch of engines here for stopping, added stopping power, and a bunch of engines right there for extra thrust going forward, because even though I had originally built this ship, its interior, and added the bunch of engines I have back there, I tested it out, worked fine, and then I added the exterior of the ship, at which point it became too heavy. It could still move if I removed its gravity generation systems, but I'd rather not do that, because it defeats the purpose of this ship being able to stop and look at an interesting something from outer space. So I ended up just adding some more engines down there. If we were to fly along here, you can see all these windows that I was sort of gesturing to earlier, where people would be sitting. Each of these rooms is color-coded in green if you look along the walls here, and that is to symbolize that these rooms are for civilians, and basically if you're in a green area, you're good. The blue here that you can see, if I look through these windows, this is actually the captain's quarters, and I'll show you more of that in a minute and explain that room and some of the other ones when I go inside. On the front here, we have the control room, or the bridge, which is mostly empty. There'd probably be some more control panels there, but currently there's not so much in the game. I didn't feel like trying to build them out of the blocks, because they'd be large and bulky at the moment. But also civilians, or whoever's on board the ship, could come and just look out this large window and enjoy the view. And down here we have the actual control seats for this ship itself, because remember, this ship is built out of small blocks. It is the largest small block ship that I've ever built. Also, this big bump up here is actually, if I fly in here a little bit, you can see up there the bridge goes up into the ceiling, so I had to accommodate that because I built the interior of the ship first. And if I was to cut this open, now you'll be able to see that inside here, you can see that we have lights in the whole ship. This is how they're set up. I'll get to those in even more detail in a minute, but our emergency reactors, you can see there's a bunch of dead space here. But if we were to fly up and through this large passway here, which is just mainly for looks, because I wanted to tie the back front of the ship and the front part of the ship together, but of course the front of the ship there was raised up, and I had to have room for this at the back of the ship, because if I put this at the very back of the ship, there wouldn't actually be room. The gravity generator, I say there wouldn't actually be room, it wouldn't actually reach. The gravity generator's range cannot reach from the very back of the ship all the way to the front, so I had to sort of stick it in something at the middle point of the ship, and instead of just having a big bulbous thing sticking up there, I decided to have something that would sort of tie the ship together. These yellow things here are just for looks. I'm going to remove that. These yellow things here are just for looks to sort of help make the ship look a bit better. I was planning on possibly painting that edge there black, but I have the edges painted black right here in this little indentation, which sort of separates each of the small civilian areas. And I didn't exactly want to have the two interfering with each other. Also, over here, we have our side-moving thrusters. I believe there are 2 or 3 behind each one of these thrusters, and we have 2 sets of them, there and there. Now, if I was to fly to the top again, you can see our downward thrusters engines. I believe there's only one here. There's not doubled. Nope, not doubled. But now, if we were to fly inside, I can start showing you the interiors. And through this door, you can see the first section here is not painted because it would show up on the outside, but everything else in the ship is actually painted. We have our little green border there to indicate that you are in a civilian area as well as the floor. Black things there and up here to sort of divide up the whole area itself, where these main support beams are actually all just painted white. And if you look up there, you can see we have reflector lights in each one of these sections. We even have it in here, even though it's not painted. And those are the small things I was showing above the control room, those little plus symbol things that were sticking up. And the lights are just stuck a few blocks above the actual ceiling usually. That way the light, when it casts down onto the ground, will make a nice shadow. And I'll show you later how the shadows look. They're a bit glitchy though, because they're all reflector lights, and also because reflector lights are the only lights you can currently use on small ships. I can't have any simpler ones. Over there, of course, is the other side of the ship, which leads out. The ship is mirrored left to right, so I'm just going to be showing one half of the ship usually. But if we were to come over here, you can see the color patterning all changes to yellow because it is the engineering area where we have our large, huge old array of reactors here. We got the big ones and even small ones on top. And this is basically the idea that maybe, hey, this is a huge reactor here, just to make it look a bit more sci-fi-ish instead of just having one little reactor or even just a big line of them. I decided to make it look a bit better. Along this wall here, we have some medium storage containers for the small ship. The idea that we'd have repair tools and spare parts just in case your ship ever broke down. Along this bar here, we have some lights where if we fly over to the center point, we also have a few lights. And, of course, as you've noticed, the whole ceiling is indeed arched, and this whole room actually was slightly inspired by in Dead Space 2, there is when you're in the Church of Unitology area, one of their indoctrination areas has this nice big room that sort of had arched ceilings with big windows at the end, and you could shoot out one of the windows and everything would get sucked out, even the nice little structure of what the church was supposed to look like when it was done. And that sort of inspired this room for some reason. Anyway, I just love Dead Space stuff, so a lot of stuff is obviously inspired by that. Anyway, back here we have our gyroscopes, little pods that point backwards a bit. Some of them, as you can see there, I didn't fully paint stuff. That could always be fixed. And as we fly along to the front of the ship now, because we are actually, now that I think about it, done back here, there's nothing else really to show, we can start looking at those little rooms that I was showing earlier from outside. And again, we're back to the green, and it carries on in the whole room. The floors are gray. The ceilings were going to be black, but I decided to leave those off because a lot of times when I was painting, I was realizing if I was to use a larger brush, let's say like that, it might actually, let's see if it actually did it. Sometimes it would actually leave, yeah, like that, a black spot on the top. So I decided, instead of going through and painting them one block at a time, if I can get inside this bloody window, such as that, which would take an age, I decided, hey, you know what, let's just leave it as a white ceiling. Why not? Can't hurt that much, right? So anyway, that's why the ceilings are white. The floors are gray. That took a while. Anyway, what else do we have here? That's about it. The idea behind these rooms, as I was saying earlier, would just be chairs for a civilian transport. All the chairs would probably just face forward, and you'd have to look over there if you want to look out. But again, the main purpose wouldn't be to look out. But if the ship was rigged to be a sort of sightseeing mode, the chairs in most of these rooms would probably face forward, and a few of these rooms would actually probably be equipped with little dining tables and stuff. That way you could, hey, oh, this is awesome, I love looking out here, but hey, I want to eat something, so they'd go and eat at some of those other places, and who knows what other things would be set up. The ship might even be rented out usually if it was in that thing, so it could be outfitted with a bunch of different stuff. Now down here, you can see we're starting to get a blue floor. The walls are still green here just because the walls here are so thin, but ideally these would also be blue, and you can see the blue stands for the control area, or captain's quarters actually is what we have here. And the idea is the captain would probably have his desk here. A dividing wall would be set up if you decide to use this as the captain's quarter and his sleeping area. And if we were to go to the other side, it is obviously the same right now, but this is where the barracks sort of thing would be set up for the 1 or 2 permanent crew members if you were to set it up as that, or at least the star charts and mapping systems, if you needed any of that, would probably be in this room or a briefing area. Or it could even be a waiting area if the ship docked frequently and had to wait for people to get on and off the ship, but usually the crew slept off of this ship. It would just be, you know, briefing. Anyway, if we were to head into here, we can look at the bridge again, but this time a better look. You can see, again, this is why that was that big bulge at the front of the ship. Ideally, we would have some sort of scanning equipment in there or communications array, but currently on small ships, if you put in any communication stuff, they're those tiny little things. I figured, hey, if you're not going to see them, what's the point currently? Especially since there's no point actually in the game currently. Again, currently, early alpha, stuff's going to come in the future, I'm sure. Also down here, again, those control panels that I was showing, I believe I showed them, where the actual commanding or pilots would sit, and they'd look out through that small window there, while everyone else got to look out this nice viewport here. And really quickly, I'm going to jump in here, and you can see the stats down there at the bottom right. Actually, I'll reload this because we lost a few of those engines and the other things, so I'll reload this really quickly, and you can see proper stats. Alrighty, there we go. Everything's been reloaded. Hop in here, and now you can see the total mass of the ship, as well as just get a good view of the ship from the external view of the pilot's seat. And you can see it's a pretty basic ship, but again, it's got a pretty basic task. I still adore the engines on the back. They're probably my favorite part of the whole ship, as well as actually the interiors I'm pretty happy with. Now, really quickly, I'm going to start us accelerating up. Again, originally this ship, I put the engines in the back there, and they worked fine and dandy. But as I started building the exterior of the ship, I very quickly realized that, hey, that's not going to work. I could get the ship to move if I removed the gravity generator, but decided it was best that I just add more engines below the floorboards as I showed earlier. Anyway, I think we're at an interesting enough speed, so I turn off the inertial dampers, and usually if you were in a large ship and you had a gravity generator, you could get going at a speed, turn off your inertial dampers, it would carry on that speed, and you could get out of your seat. I got my jetpack on currently, but if I was to turn off my jetpack, whoosh, I'm thrown against the wall. This, for some reason, even though I have my inertial dampeners off, and I'm not even flying, I'm just sitting here on the ground, you can see my jetpacks are completely off, I'm still being thrown against the back wall. I'm not exactly sure why this is. I assume it's some sort of game thing. Of course, if I turn on my jetpack with my inertial dampers off, I can float around the ship easily, and I could go to the different rooms. So ideally, if they never change this, you would have to have little seats, and hopefully eventually they'll also put little seats into the game where you can just sit in those without being able to control the ship, and those people would just simply wait till the ship got to its viewing point or wait till it got to the next harbor. Anyway, if we were to hop back in one of these, if I can get a hold of them, I can turn our inertial dampers on, and that'll slow the ship up. So jetpack off. There you go, the ship's slowed up. And actually now I will hop back in there really quickly and turn on all the lights in the ship. And you'll see a lot of weird glitchy stuff happening. That is because these are all dynamic lights, and I believe currently a lot of their shadows are actually fighting for dominance. So one light is projecting a shadow, and it's covering up other lights sometimes, and they're having trouble fighting with each other. And see, they've all just shut off there, but if you look at the top right, we got some weirdness going on there. All sorts of weirdness. So the ship does not look nearly as beautiful as it should, but of course this is early alpha, things are subject to change, and I'm sure this will be something that's changed, probably not anytime soon, but down the line we'll see it optimized. You can see how these, oh wow, there's some random floating blocks in here. That's a bit weird. But you can see how the captain's quarters, or as this is, the sort of map charting or other people crew area, has these nice little square lights set up, because of course the lights are placed higher in the ceiling. And down all these hallways, you can see how interesting it is. Currently, it looks a bit like Dead Space because the lights keep flickering on and off as you walk. And it's like, okay, what's going on? Is something going to jump out at me? But like I said, it's just a glitch to deal with lighting, probably trying to take dominance over each other. If we were to come into this room, you can see these lights are not as high placed in the ceiling, so their shadows are nicer. Also, the ceiling, I believe, is just a bit higher. So it's a much softer shadows where they're meeting over each other, even if we continue to get these glitches. Also, you might notice things in the distance often don't show up at all, and I believe that's some sort of level of detail where the lights just don't render after a certain distance. Really quickly, while I'm in this hallway, I'm going to throw up a picture of a much earlier build of this, where before I painted it all, before I had most of the ship, where I turned on the lights and you can see how it looked then. It was very, very nice, and here it is now. You see it looked very nice, but of course it was unpainted, the ship wasn't done. At this point it was basically just this hallway when I was testing out the lighting. And you can just imagine that one day, once they optimize all this, being able to see this hallway look like that again but of course with it properly painted. Anyway, one last room to show before I finish this up, and that is the engineering room back here. If we run through all these glitchy lights, also obviously, as I'm sure you've noticed, rather painfully, that the frame rate is indeed murdered by these lights, and that's because, as I've said before, they're all dynamic lights, so they're all rendering real-time shadows, and then fighting for dominance over shadows, and all sorts of nonsense going on here. But anyway, here you go. This is the reactor room in all of its glory with the lights on. At the far end of the room, there should be lights on there, but as I said earlier, they've sort of been cold because of their distance. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.